Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Hi everyone, I'm Sylvain. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your practice. Thank you for liking, subscribing. You keep this channel going and you make it available to more people by doing so. To our patrons, we all thank you. We're on our way, and slowly but surely, whether it's a recurring donation or a simple one-of, every single piece of support, financial or like what I said earlier, like, subscribe, that kind of thing. It all helps this channel to survive and to grow, which is our mission of propagation, isn't it? So in that vein, just a quick reminder, you see in the beginnings and end of these videos the web addresses of the threefoldlotus.com free information website. Lots of downloads to be had, PDFs and the like, and links on the core study materials page. The bookstore, the mandala store, so you can have an accurate Nichiren inscribed mandala with nobody else's names and dates on it. We don't practice their doctrine of Shakyamuni's Buddhism. We practice Nichiren. Nichiren's our mentor. He's our personal modern teacher, right? So, yeah. I just gave somebody a lengthy answer, and it's never long enough because I could talk, and I have talked many videos on this channel about why I'm an independent Buddhist, why independent Buddhist practice is the way to go. Organizations, by their design, whether it's a sect or a group or a whatever, an organization is an organization. Its first concern is the organization. It's not you, it's not your practice, it's how do we grow our organization. And when I talk about growth here, I'm not talking about an organization. There is no hierarchy here. There's no authoritarianism. There's no, you must do these things to qualify to be a Buddhist. And what? That's just not Buddhism. Siddhartha Gautama spent his life looking for a universal answer that anyone at any time could simply alleviate the stresses and anxieties of this life. In order to what? Why bother? In order to experience this life to its most fulfilling, most gratifying, most free, most engaging, complete manifestation of our life. And what he came to is Buddhism. Is simply a shift, a shift of perspective to experience things as they are, moment to moment to moment. And so we're going to start talking about that in the Lankavatara here, in this early Mahayana text, with all of its foibles of translation and so forth. The subject matter, though, as Mahamati starts to engage on question by question instead of this plethora of questions and doubts. He's going to try to focus in on one subject, and this is going to start setting the rhythm of the Lankavatara, okay? And this first question, I just want you to be mindful. In Buddhism, in the realization of Shakyamuni, is that although we don't experience it through our samsaric mind of perception, and I've talked about this before, we tend to connect to everything. Everything is a point, a location in time-space. But it's far too massive an endeavor for our consciousnesses, our eight consciousnesses, to identify, classify, and put into a cubby every single minutia of every single moment that something is instantiating. It just, time would compress, wouldn't it? We would spend all our time in each moment, and those moments would stretch, and everything would slow down. Right? So, our consciousnesses, our eyes, our ears, tend to string things together in a linear fashion. Unfortunately, this means that we invest a great deal of identity in the linearness of things, which falsely gives the impression that they exist past, present, and future as a solid, self-existing thing. This is part and parcel of the enlightenment of Buddhism that says maybe you can adjust your mind to what's actually happening, and that is that everything in the entire universe is constantly instantiating moment to moment to moment. It's not always there. It's renewed or decays moment to moment to moment. It's never, ever the same. It's actually in flux and changing moment to moment. And so there's this concept, when you dig into that to try to understand that in Buddhism, that says every phenomena, from the energy packet that is a photon, because it's not a thing, it's only a thing by description of a packet of energy. But a photon has no mass. It's not, it's not made of thing. It's a packet of energy, a quanta, to be accurate, of energy. That word may sound familiar to you, a quanta. Yes, that leads to quantum, right? So that photon, it comes into existence. I know your question, hang on. It abides for that moment, and then it ceases to instantiate. It ceases to be. It ceases to exist. It is extinct until the next moment that it once again instantiates, abides, and goes extinct. That not only applies to photons, it also applies to galaxies, stars, planets, you, me, eyeball, pencil, everything, every phenomena. It doesn't have to be solid. It can be thought. It can be air. It can be all phenomena. Arise, abide, cease. Everything. And once you can conceive of that, you go, okay, yeah. Everything has a time, and then it goes in decrepitude, and then it disappears, goes back into the ground, whatever. Where does it come from? Where does it go? If you understand that process. And then you can mentally, because this you're not going to be able to see it. You can see it mentally. Compress that time period of arising, abiding, and ceasing into a moment. And we've talked about moments, right? The Planck constant, a number so small you can't even, it's very difficult to envision. Just know that it is so brief that it almost ceases to exist itself. And that process is happening at that rate. Birth, death, 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 birth, death. That process. So what is that process arising from and ceasing into? And this is the province of terminology. The terminology that I think suits, fits, is most easily graspable by our minds is energy in a quiescent state. Another word for energy in a quiescent state, energy that's doing nothing, is potential. Potential is a great word because it indicates that something can happen, but that nothing is happening now. Oh, something, a perturbation. You can go to string theory and M theory here and talk about membranes that maybe run into one another. And then you got to ask, what are the membranes in? Maybe it's easier to think of energy, which is a constantly, quietly undulating thing, but no work is being applied to it. It's just this ripple, but not much of a ripple, because then there'd be space-time, and now something's happening. So very quiet and fields of energy. And we're really starting to think this way with our sciences too. Electron fields, right? Why are all electrons the same, whether they're in a drop of water here on Earth or on Pluto or on an asteroid from outside this galaxy? The electrons on all of the matter, they're all the same. They all weigh the same. They all have the same charge. Well, we now know that there's antimatter, so there's muons that are electrons, but they're positive instead of negative. It just gets more fascinating the more we dig into the nature of life, yeah? But who asked this question? Who observed that no matter where we look at an electron in the universe, it's exactly the same? And then some brilliant scientists came up, or a group of scientists came up and said, well, that's because electrons, they don't just form individually, which is why we're confused. They form of an electron field, which is everywhere. There it is again, quanta. A field that we're unable to perceive with our earthbound samsaric consciousnesses precipitates electrons wherever they're necessary to instantiate something, to take an action toward instantiation, form. And what do we know about action and energy? It's karma. If you understand that, then you understand that this entire universe is karma. And that you and I are an assemblage, an amalgam of great variations with tendencies and conditions of karma. We're not the entire karma, but we are a bundle, if you will, of karma. And your karma and my karma share a hell of a lot with the universe, with life, with trees and dirt, with dogs and birds, and certainly with one another. There's very little, actually, that separates us. And the cumulative experience that we have shapes the way that we continue to experience. So this is where Buddhism steps in and goes, well, if you understand all of that, then there's an opportunity here to influence that momentum of energy. Influence it toward its full expression and disconcern yourself, detach yourself from this obsession of making permanent, because that's an illusion. That's not what's happening. Oh, so intellectually I can come to that and go, okay, I think I get that. I think I understand that. But experiencing it, that's a little different game, isn't it? So it's not until we introduce the ninth consciousness, the Buddha consciousness, the Gohonzon doorway of our samsaric mind to go and emancipate ourselves, release ourselves, liberate ourselves from that constant craving and attachment, something we've created. So if we've created it, we can stop it. And still everything remains. We don't annihilate anything or get rid of anything. But now we understand. We see more profoundly into the true nature of all phenomena. That's Buddhism, in a nutshell. That word salad. So, Mahamati, he asked the question of the emancipated one. The Bodhisattva Mahasattva said again to the emancipated one, in how many ways, interesting way to put this question, does the rise, abiding, and ceasing of the Vijnanas take place? So, the core, what I just explained to you, every phenomena arises, abides, and ceases. Everything, every phenomena, moment to moment, arises, abides, and ceases. Arises, abides, and ceases. Arises, abides, and ceases. Birth, death, birth, death, birth, death, birth, death. Moment to moment. It's going by so fast, we just put a line through it and go, look, it's happening, it's real, it's permanent. Error. But he's asking this about the Vijnanas, the mental conjurings, right? The different levels of consciousness, albeit in the Lanka, 8. Still, interesting questions. When does this thinking facility come into being? When does this I consciousness start to see and stop to see? When does my ear consciousness, my oral consciousness, come into being? Must start before I am. Where does it start? Where does it end? Okay. A very bodily reference, right? Keep reminding you of this. That's the ego talking, this collection of me. How does my mind come into being is really the question here. So Shakyamuni responds, there are 2 ways, Mahamati, in which the rise, abiding, and ceasing of the Vijnanas take place. And this is not understood by the philosophers because they're very ego-bound, yeah? That is to say, the ceasing takes place as regards continuation and form. This is this linear idea. And form being a thing in and of itself rather than an instantiation. We're going to keep hammering on this because this is basically the sorting out in the Lankavatara. That is to say, the ceasing takes place as regards continuation and form. In the rise of the Vijnanas also, these two are recognizable. The rise as regards continuation and the rise as regards form. In the abiding, also, these two are discernible. The one taking place as regards continuation and the other as regards form. Further, three modes are distinguishable in the Vijnanas. One, the Vijnana are as evolving, right? Each moment of experience lends its colorations of tendencies and conditions to that particular Vijnana. Talked about this before too. Karma as evolving. Karma starts as a set, but it's a moment-to-moment thing, right? So in the next moment, there's input. There's environment. There's conditions. And those tendencies respond to conditions. So karma is always evolving. Second, the Vijnana as producing effects. As it evolves and as it simply moves through time-space, it affects its environs. Its environment, every instantiation of it. And thirdly, the Vijnana as remaining in its original nature. It has tendencies and conditions from the get-go that are what I call momentum, kinetically, moving through time-space and collecting, right? It's kind of like a snowball. As it rolls along, it collects more experience and it affects what it's rolling through. But the original snowball's still within it, yeah? Further, Mahamati, in the Vijnanas, which are said to be 8, 2 functions generally are distinguishable. The perceiving and the object discriminating. As a mirror reflects forms, Mahamati, the perceiving Vijnana, Vijnana, perceives objects. Objects of discrimination. Mahamati, between the two, the perceiving Vijnana and the object discriminating Vijnana, there is no difference. They happen at the same instance. Look at that. They are mutually conditioning. I perceive a that, and that is in my perception. See, Buddhism dissects the world at such a minute level. Don't get too lost in it, but it is rather fascinating because it does expand your idea of what it is to experience anything. What are you actually experiencing? And that's a good question in Buddhism. It helps to expand your experience. As much as it identifies it minutely, it lends a great depth of wisdom to what is actually going on in our momentum of life, time, space, yeah? Then Mahamati, the perceiving Vijnana, functions because of the transformations taking place in the mind by reason of a habit energy. It says mysterious here, but there's nothing mysterious about it. Once you identify something, you continue to identify it thus. Right? Once you identify ball, every time you see it, you persist on identifying that ball as the same ball from 10 minutes ago, from 10 years ago. But we know that's not true. Yes, it's still a tendency and condition instantiating as quote unquote ball, but it's not the same ball because it's instantiating moment to moment, just like you and I. I know this is melon twisting stuff, but it's really not that hard to understand, is it? While Mahamati, the object discriminating Vijnana, functions because of the mind's discriminating an objective world and becomes of the habit energy accumulated by erroneous reasonings since beginningless time. So what is that word salad about? This is the process, the engine of life. Whenever you hear since beginningless time, where does time begin? Where does it end? This universe is the great big time machine. It is what spawns what we call life, but life is nothing less and nothing more than a great big time machine, allowing the expression of potential to move through time-space. And I absolutely love Roger Penrose's take on the CCC, the cyclic cosmology, right? The cyclic conformal cosmology, CCC. And, you know, like all great thinkers, there's always others to try to destroy what they've come up with. But in terms of Buddhism anyway, the vision of the universe expanding until it's all black holes, and then because then there's no space-time, everything collapses because there's no thing anymore. Black holes are just radiation, photons essentially, which have no mass. Then there's no reason for size to exist. Everything reduces again to an infinitesimal point, location, where the energies of all that compress to once again poof into a new epoch of the same energies that produced the universe in the first place. So cyclical. That's so eloquent, so beautiful. Thank you, Roger Penrose. And when you read and study Buddhism, that fits so perfectly. I'm not trying to make a new religion here. I'm just using the knowledge that we've gained from great minds and indicating that Shakyamuni was thousands of years ahead of our understanding of life so far. That's mind-boggling, yeah? How precious is this practice? Again, Mahamati, by the cessation of all the sense Vijnanas is meant the cessation of the alaya Vijnanas. The alaya being that eighth most profound consciousness. And what is the alaya? It's that freight train of karma, instantiating moment to moment to moment. And so even that collection that is the eighth consciousness arises, abides, and ceases. Which means that the apparatus that we identify as Sylvain, June, whatever label you give your assemblage of karma, arises a mind that only can exist while this apparatus exists. And when this apparatus ceases, so too does the mind. We are moment-to-moment instantiations of tendencies and conditions, which themselves have the tendency and condition fundamentally of arising, abiding, and ceasing. So I'll remind you, the implication of that is the only place that you can place, the only time, the only place, the only way that you can achieve enlightenment is while this apparatus is abiding. And our Buddha-ness, the ninth consciousness, if you haven't been taking notes, is the all-encompassing formations of potential. The very mechanism that creates the universe, creates you and I, is not a creator. It is a function of karma. It's a function of energy that it will do this when prodded, when action, when some force, some action perturbs it. It just explodes into all of this. Not with a consciousness, just by its nature. Does energy have a self-nature? No, because a self-nature would amount to its knowing what it's doing, and it does not. It's just energy, quiet, doing no thing, phenomena, until some perturbation excites some quality of energy into amalgamating into something and possibly just returning into quietude. The actions, the potential for the instantiation of a universe, that chain reaction, that amalgam of things happening with tendencies and conditions. That may be supremely rare. It may be something that happens constantly. When you reach that level of seeing, please let me know. Nobody knows that yet. All we know is the process. We understand the process. That's what Buddhism is looking at, the process. And if you understand the process intimately, then you cease to be controlled by, influenced by, things that don't really permanently exist. They're just possessions, commitments of identity. That's what a possession is. We fool ourselves and think, I own this computer. And I've already told you it's more accurate to say the computer owns me. How many times does it pop up a message to tell me what to do? What's really happening there is I'm identifying myself in some portion by the ownership, this relationship I've created between myself and this object. And this object obviates my perception of it. I've created an intimate relationship here that's so intimate that it actually identifies me, not it. It then becomes a mirror of something I want a relationship with. That aspect of myself I'm defining by this object. This is how Buddhism dissects our samsaric obsession of identifying self. It's all ego. Do you understand now? Sometimes we don't understand what ego means. It's a psychological process. but it's not the actual process, which is moment-to-moment instantiation of potential. All right, let's continue. Good on time. Again, Mahamati, by the cessation of all sense vijnana is meant the cessation of the alaya vijnanas, variously accumulating habit energy, which is generated by when unrealities are discriminated. It's what I was trying to describe a few moments ago. The habit energy is our linearness, our habit of connecting points to construct a line, which is our way of making something that's occurring moment to moment into a solid, existing, permanent thing. And even if you totally understand that this permanent thing will one day no longer be permanent, you still work with it, identify it as permanent. Because if it's permanent, then it identifies a little piece of me-ness, ego. If it's not permanent, then I'm kind of floating, and that's scary. So this is the samsaric mind. It's concerned with only one thing. The profound desire, which is the engine of the whole samsaric universe, to be. I want to be. I want to be. I want to have so that I can be. I want. That's why it's called craving. Buddhism shifts the needle a little bit and says, stop worrying about getting there. How about just being there? What? Yeah, don't worry about getting there. Just be there. Oh, everything's here. Wow. Oh, wow. I'm relaxing. I'm no longer having to crave because it's all here. Of course, then you can slip right by that point going, where's it going? How long am I going to have it? When am I going to lose it? You might as well have gone right back, right? Big loop. Buddhism is trying to catch you in that moment where you realize everything's happening at the same time. Time. Moment. All right, let's continue. So that's habit energy, right? By that which supports the Vijnanas is meant the habit energy, and here he says, or memory. That's not a true understanding. It's not just memory. It's the projection of permanence. Memory is a part of that because you're projecting that into the future, but it's not strictly speaking memory, is it? So I don't like that parenthetical. I don't think that's right. Habit energy indicates a constantly roiling activity. Karma, not memory. You see? Big difference. Which has been accumulated by erroneous reasonings since beginningless time. There we are again. But don't miss the bigger picture here. He's saying that your mind, the habit energies that you're constantly instantiating in your mind, the impetus, the energies, the formations of that, which is in the parlance so far specific to your time-space being, has its roots in the formation of the universe. It's the same energy. It's the same commitment. Now, don't think that that means that the entire universe is a mind. We're not talking about mind Well, we are, but we're talking about the instantiation of habit energy that the mind perceives and uses and creates. That energy, that karma, has existed since beginningless time. In other words, the very formation of the universe. You are an expression of energy no different from the universe, and by which is comprehended by the Vijnanas is meant the objective world perceived and discriminated by the Vijnanas, which is subjective, which is, however, no more than mind itself. If you can conceive of the whole activity here, this beginningless time manifesting a mind consciousness that can discriminate what it observes and creates a habit energy out of it, maintains that illusion through time, making it permanent. The nature of that activity is the mind itself. And this is what we're going to work on training. Mahamati, it is like a lump of clay, and the particles of dust making up its substance, they are neither different nor not different. Again, it is like gold and various ornaments made of it. If, Mahamati, the lump of clay is different from its particles of dust, no lump will ever come out of them. But if it comes out of them, it is not different from the particles of dust. Interesting example, don't you think? So once you have energy perturbed, any kind of work or action combined with energy, you have this process. You have the process of formation. And because there's formation, there's form. And all phenomena, the entire universe, quasars, planets, galaxies, you and I, we're all of this same exact process. And by ipso facto reasoning, you and I are no different than the creation of the universe. We're all the same process. In here lies the cliche of the oneness of Buddhism, yeah? Again, if there's no difference between the two, the lump will be indistinguishable from its particles. That is a very interesting statement. If you dissect that for a moment, that means that once you drop the illusion of differentiation and discriminations, you can then see that, like the particles of dust in the clay and the clay itself and the lump, more specifically, of clay, there is no difference. There's that release again. Like you and I are a lump of clay, the earth, the stars, the moon, lumps of clay, all the same. Joni Mitchell rings in. We are stardust. We are golden. That comes from this reasoning. The differences are our habit energy, not real. Even so, Mahamati, if the evolving Vijnanas are different from the Alaya Vijnana, even in its original form, the Alaya cannot be their cause, because it's an accumulation as well, isn't it? Again, if they are not different, the cessation of evolving Vijnanas will mean the cessation of the Alaya Vijnana, but there is no cessation of the original form. Therefore, Mahamati, what ceases to function is not the Alaya in its original self-form, but is the effect producing form of the Vijnanas. When the original self-form ceases to exist, then there will indeed be the cessation of the alaya vijnana. If, however, there is the cessation of the alaya vijnana, this doctrine will in no ways differ from the nihilistic doctrine of the philosophers. Interesting distinction. Typos notwithstanding. This doctrine, Mahamati, as it is held by the philosophers, is this: when the grasping of an objective world ceases, the continuation of the vijnanas is stopped. And when there is no more of this continuation in the vijnanas, the continuation that has been going on since beginningless time is also destroyed. Mahamati, the philosophers maintain that there is a first cause from which continuation takes place. They do not maintain that the I Vijnana arises from the interaction of form and light. They assume another cause. What is this cause, Mahamati? Their first cause is known as spirit, or soul, or Lord, or time, or the atom. So he's identifying this ego problem of the philosophical mind, assuming the center of every creation in the world, in the universe, comes from a person, ego. That's what this is saying. It's saying that the whole process of the universe ends when you stop thinking about it. How did you become... And see, this is why religions begin. Because people are trying to identify this process and identify it as something that mirrors them. Look, it's in the Bible. It's in the Quran. It's in the Torah. Created in his image. This obsession of self-deification. All religions are about the body. Only Buddhism blows that apart. This is why I continually maintain that Buddhism is not a religion. It shatters religion. It is an insight so profound that we all become egoless. And egolessness is a word used often in the Lankavatara as well as other sutras, right? It's not that you and I don't exist. It's that to understand what habit, energy, momentum we represent and instantiate a mind to perceive is just part of a huge process of life. It's not about you and me, it's about life. And then we become released from the responsibility of the universe. We're just part of it. We're the eyes of. We're the witnesses of. How amazing. So that ends part 4. Part 5 is incredibly brief. Oh, well, it's so brief, it'll end our present conversation nicely. Again, Mahamati, there are 7 kinds of self-nature. Interesting. Collection, amalgams, right? Being, bhava, moment to moment, being, instantiation. Characteristic marks are tendencies and conditions of being. Elements, which we identify through discerning mass, matter, right? Water, earth, fire, so on. Causality, the actions taken on the energy. Conditionality, those actions within a context. And perfection, a reaching for completeness, right? Manifested. This book manifested. This mouse facet manifested. This I manifested. This self manifested. That's a perfection of the process, yeah? Interesting. And these being called self-nature are manufactured by this ego, habit, energy, compendium, yeah? Then we'll go into part 6. Again, Mahamadi, there are 7 kinds of first principles. So he's going to start dissecting this even further. I appreciate your listening, your participation, your commitment to your practice. I laud you for that. I deeply appreciate you for that. And I look forward to the next one. Until then, bye for now.